The torrential rain transformed the night into an apocalyptic scene. Lightning carved through the sky, momentarily illuminating the flickering sign of St. Mary's Hospital in Phoenix. Inside, Elia Carter, a devoted nurse, battled fatigue with sips of cold coffee, the dull hum of the hospital a constant companion. It was just another night. At least, that's what she thought. The soft swish of the automatic doors breaking the silence caught her attention. Elia glanced toward the lobby, expecting to see a late visitor or a medical team returning from an emergency. But the sight froze her in place. A lion. Yes, a lion. Majestic and enormous, its golden mane shimmering even in the downpour. It stood in the doorway, raindrops cascading off its fur, its piercing amber eyes scanning the room with an intelligence that felt almost human. And it was holding something. Elia's coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile floor. The sound barely registered. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but something deeper held her rooted in place. The lion stepped forward, calm and deliberate. No roar, no aggression. It carried its burden with such care that the scene felt surreal, like a dream on the brink of becoming a nightmare. It stopped in the center of the lobby. The bundle it carried was gently placed on the floor. With an almost tender nudge of its muzzle, the lion pushed the bundle toward the stunned crowd. Its eyes locked onto Elia's, drawing her in like a magnet. Time seemed to pause. Every sound, the beeping monitors, the muffled rain, the whispers, faded into silence. Elia's breath hitched as she took an unsteady step forward. Her training screamed at her to stay back, but the connection she felt with the creature was undeniable, as though it had chosen her for this moment. Slowly, she knelt before the bundle. Her hands trembled as she peeled back the drenched fabric. Gasps rippled through the lobby as the final fold revealed a newborn baby. Small, frail, its tiny chest rising and falling unevenly. The bluish tint of its lips signaled its dire condition. Without hesitation, Elia's professional instincts kicked in. Pediatric team. Now, she shouted, her voice slicing through the stunned silence. The lion didn't flinch as a flurry of doctors and nurses surrounded the baby, wheeling over an incubator. It simply watched, still and silent, its eyes never leaving Elia. As the team rushed the baby toward the neonatal unit, Elia turned back to the lion, her heart pounding with questions. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. What are you? The lion didn't answer, of course. But its gaze held depths she couldn't comprehend, as though it carried the weight of untold secrets. Carter. A sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Dr. Marcus Green, the hospital's chief, strode toward her, his expression a mix of bewilderment and authority. What the hell is going on here? Before Elia could respond, the lion stood. The crowd recoiled instinctively, but it made no move to attack. Instead, it turned toward the doors. No. Wait. Elia's voice cracked as she rushed after it. The lion paused at the entrance, rain pelting its massive frame. It glanced back at her one last time, its eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name. Sadness? Gratitude? Farewell? And then, with deliberate steps, it vanished into the storm. Elia stood motionless, her heart a storm of its own. The rain soaked through her scrubs, but she didn't care. She knew, somehow, this wasn't the end. Carter. A nurse's urgent voice broke through her daze. Look. We found this in the baby's blanket. It was a small golden locket, aged and tarnished. Elia's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was an old photograph of a woman cradling a baby and an inscription on the back. To Anna. Protect him at all costs. Elia's chest tightened as a wave of questions flooded her mind. Who was Anna? How had the lion known to bring the baby here? The rain continued to drum against the windows, a relentless reminder of the night's chaos. But for Elia, the world had stilled, focused on the locket in her hand. Her eyes drifted to the door where the lion had disappeared. Deep down, she knew, this was far from over. And then, Elia stood frozen, clutching the locket as if it were the last thread tethering this mystery to reality. Questions swirled in her mind, each one louder than the last, but there was no time for answers now. She turned and sprinted back to the neonatal unit, where doctors were still working frantically to stabilize the baby. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The heart monitor beeped erratically, and the murmurs of the medical team created a low, anxious hum. Dr. Green, visibly shaken, turned to Elia with a grim expression. He's fighting, but we don't know if he'll make it. Elia approached the incubator, staring at the fragile life before her. Her fingers tightened around the locket, as though it held the power to summon a miracle. But she knew better. Miracles didn't work that way. Suddenly, a panicked shout echoed down the hallway. Emergency in the main lobby. Elia exchanged a sharp glance with Dr. Green before bolting toward the commotion. By the time she reached the lobby, chaos had erupted. Police officers, reporters, and curious onlookers crowded outside the hospital, their voices blending into a cacophony of confusion. At the center of it all was the man from before, the one who had sought the baby, now on his knees, clutching his head in anguish. "He came back," the man cried, his voice breaking with desperation. Elia followed the collective gaze of the crowd. Standing in the rain, just beyond the hospital's entrance, was the lion. But this time, it wasn't alone. Behind the lion, dark figures began to emerge, their forms twisting and indistinct, like living shadows distorted by the flicker of lightning. The lion let out a thunderous roar, a sound so deep and primal it seemed to shake the very foundation of the hospital. The shadowy entities advanced slowly, their movements deliberate and menacing. The air grew heavy, thick with an ancient fear that gripped everyone in its icy clutch. Elia didn't hesitate. She turned and ran back to the neonatal unit, her heart pounding like a drum. "Lock the doors. Protect the baby," she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. Dr. Green and the others hesitated for only a moment before springing into action. The heavy doors were sealed, and silence fell, broken only by the faint patter of rain against the windows. Elia turned her attention back to the baby. His tiny chest rose and fell faintly, each breath a fragile miracle. And then, the heart monitor flatlined. "No, no, no," Elia whispered, her hands working desperately to resuscitate him. But it was no use. The baby lay still. Outside, the lion's roar shattered the quiet, followed by a sound that froze Elia to her core, a shriek high-pitched and inhuman, filled with sorrow and rage. Dr. Green placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Elia didn't answer. Her gaze fell to the locket in her hand. Her breath caught in her throat as she noticed something strange. The locket was empty. The photograph it had once held was gone, as though it had never existed. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of the night bore down on her. The lion had come to protect, but at what cost? When she finally opened her eyes, the hospital was eerily silent. The shadows, the lion, everything had vanished. Only the rain remained, washing over the world as if cleansing it of the night's horrors. Elia stared out into the storm, the locket still clutched tightly in her hand. She knew she'd never find the answers she sought. And deep down, she feared the truth. Some stories aren't meant to have happy endings.